I thought I was going to a birthday lunch, my 68th, with the boy I raised as my own. Instead, he drove me to a place where the air smelled of antiseptic and forgotten promises, a nursing home. My suitcase was already packed, my phone taken, my life signed away. And he smiled as he did it. I stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because I was watching. Welcome to the Betrayal Revenge channel, where stories come alive through voices you've never heard told this way before. Thank you for joining us. Let's uncover the truth together. It all began on a crisp Charleston morning, the kind where the sun filters through Spanish moss and you can almost believe the world is kind. The doorbell chimed at exactly 10 a.m., a sharp, cheerful sound that cut through the quiet of my small Charleston home. I smoothed my navy dress, the one I saved for special occasions, and checked my reflection in the hall mirror. My hair was neatly pinned, a touch of lipstick brightening my face. It was my 68th birthday, and Tyler, my stepson, had promised lunch, a rare treat. My heart fluttered with something like hope, though I'd learned long ago to temper it with caution. Tyler hadn't called much lately. Work, he said, always work, but he'd texted last night. "Lunch tomorrow, Mom. I'll pick you up." He called me Mom. That word still warmed me, even after all these years. I opened the door, and there he was, 38 years old, but still carrying that boyish grin, the one that used to charm teachers and neighbors. He held a grocery store cake, chocolate with uneven frosting, and a bouquet of daisies that looked like they'd been an afterthought. "Happy birthday, Evelyn," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. I smiled, ignoring the slight sting that he hadn't called me Mom in person. "You didn't have to," I said, taking the cake. His eyes darted past me, into the house, before settling back on my face. "Get your coat," he said. "I made reservations." The air was cool as we stepped outside, the scent of damp leaves heavy from last night's rain. I slid into his sleek black sedan, the leather cold against my legs. "Where are we going?" I asked, buckling my seatbelt. He didn't answer right away, just started the engine and pulled onto the street. "Somewhere nice," he said finally, his hands tight on the wheel. I nodded, watching the familiar streets of Charleston roll by, the pastel houses, the oaks draped in moss. But something felt off. The silence in the car was too thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. I glanced at Tyler. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the road. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be. He nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just traffic." We drove past the city center, past the restaurants I'd imagined we'd go to. The buildings thinned, replaced by wide lawns and long driveways. My stomach twisted as we turned onto a road I didn't recognize, lined with neatly trimmed hedges. A sign loomed ahead, white with gold lettering. Hearthgrove Pines Senior Living Facility. My breath caught. "Tyler," I said, my voice sharp now, "what is this?" He didn't look at me. "We need to talk, Evelyn." His tone was calm, too calm, like he'd rehearsed it. "This is for your own good." The car slowed and I gripped the door handle, my knuckles whitening. "For my own good?" I repeated, my mind racing. "You said lunch. You said—" My voice broke. He parked in front of a low brick building, its windows reflecting the gray sky. Nurses in pale blue scrubs moved behind the glass doors. "I'm not going in there," I said, my words trembling. Tyler sighed, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You're not safe living alone anymore. The house, your memory, it's too much." "Memory?" I stared at him, my heart pounding. "My memory is fine, you know that." He got out, walked around to the trunk, and pulled out a suitcase. My suitcase. I recognized the faded blue canvas, the one I kept in the attic. My legs felt heavy as I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching under my shoes. "You went through my things?" I whispered. The air smelled of antiseptic and wet grass, a sterile, suffocating mix. Tyler didn't answer. He was already heading toward the entrance, the suitcase rolling behind him. I followed, not because I wanted to, but because my body moved on instinct, like a moth drawn to a flame it knows will burn. Inside, the lobby was too bright, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. A receptionist with a practiced smile greeted us. "Mrs. Evelyn, welcome to Hearthgrove Pines," she said, her voice syrupy. I flinched at the sound of my name. Tyler handed her a stack of papers, his signature already scrawled across them. "Power of attorney," he said, not looking at me. "She's been forgetting things. It's not safe." The lie landed like a slap. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words caught in my throat. The receptionist nodded, her eyes sliding over me like I was already invisible. "We'll take good care of her," she said. They took my purse, my phone, my keys. "For safekeeping," a nurse said, her hands moving too quickly. I stood there, my navy dress suddenly feeling like a costume, my birthday cake forgotten on the counter. Tyler turned to me, his face soft now, almost convincing. "I'm just protecting you, Evelyn," he said, his voice low, but his eyes flickered with something else. Guilt, maybe, or fear. I wanted to scream, to demand why, but my tongue felt heavy, my chest tight. He hugged me, a brief, stiff embrace, and then he was gone, the glass doors sliding shut behind him. A nurse led me to a room down a long hallway, the walls painted a sickly beige. The air was thick with the scent of overcooked vegetables and cleaning solution. My room was small, with a single bed, a chair, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. My suitcase sat in the corner, a stranger in this sterile place. I sank onto the bed, my hands trembling. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, each second a reminder of what had just happened. My birthday, my 68th, the day I thought I'd be celebrated, had become the day I was erased. I replayed Tyler's words in my head, searching for the moment I'd missed, the sign I'd ignored. He'd called me Mom once, years ago, when he was 16, and I was the new woman in his father's life. I'd believed we were family, that my sacrifices, my time, my savings, my heart, had built something real. But now, sitting in this room that smelled of bleach and regret, I felt the truth settle like dust. I was never his mother. I was a placeholder, a means to an end. And he'd planned this, hadn't he? The cake, the flowers, the lie about lunch, it was all a performance. My fingers brushed the hem of my dress, still crisp from the iron. I dressed for a celebration, not a betrayal. The pain in my chest sharpened, not just sorrow, but something hotter, something alive. Anger. Why had he done this? What was he hiding? I didn't know yet, but as I stared at the locked door, one thought burned brighter than the rest. I wasn't going to stay here. And Tyler, the boy I'd once loved like my own, had no idea what he'd just unleashed. What do you do when the family you built with your own hands turns out to be a house of cards? I sat in that sterile room at Hearthgrove Pines, the ticking clock my only company, and wondered, had all my years of sacrifice meant nothing? The truth was clawing at me, but I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. The air in my room was stale, heavy with the faint tang of antiseptic and something sweeter, like wilted flowers left too long in a vase. The beige walls seemed to close in, and the single window offered no escape, just a view of a brick wall that mocked my confinement. My navy dress, still crisp from yesterday's betrayal, hung in the tiny closet, a reminder of the birthday that never was. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands folded tightly in my lap, and let my mind drift back, not to yesterday, but to the years that led me here, to the life I thought I'd built with George and Tyler, to the sacrifices I'd made, believing they'd woven me into their family. It was 16 years ago when I met George, a widower with a teenage son and a quiet strength that drew me in. I was 52 then, a florist with a small shop in Charleston, my days filled with the scent of roses and the hum of customers. I'd never had children, never married, but I'd always believed family was something you could choose. George made me believe it too. He'd come into my shop one spring, looking for lilies for his late wife's grave, and we talked. First about flowers, then about life. His eyes crinkled when he smiled, and his voice carried a warmth that felt like home. 6 months later, we were married. Tyler was 16, lanky and guarded, with his mother's sharp jaw and his father's hazel eyes. I didn't expect him to call me Mom right away, or ever, really. I just wanted to be someone he could rely on. I cooked dinners, helped with his homework, drove him to soccer practice when George worked late. I remember the first time he hugged me after I stayed up all night helping him finish a history project. "Thanks, Evelyn," he'd mumbled, his arms quick but sincere. It felt like a victory, a crack in the wall he'd built. Over time, he started calling me Mom, and each time my heart swelled. I thought it meant I belonged. But belonging came at a cost. George was the anchor of our family, steady but stretched thin between his construction business and raising Tyler. I wanted to ease his burden, so I gave up pieces of myself. I sold my flower shop to be home more, trading the joy of arranging peonies for the routine of laundry and grocery runs. I didn't mind, not at first. I loved George, and I loved the life we were building. When Tyler needed money for college, I dipped into my savings, the nest egg I'd saved for my own retirement. It's for family, I told myself, handing over the check. Tyler thanked me, his eyes bright with ambition, promising he'd make us proud. The years passed, and George's health began to falter. Heart trouble, the doctors said, and I became his nurse as much as his wife. I measured his pills, drove him to appointments, held his hand through sleepless nights when the pain kept him awake. Tyler was in his 20s by then, building his own life, a small real estate office, a flashy car, a string of girlfriends. He visited less, called rarely. "He's busy," George would say, his voice tinged with disappointment he tried to hide. I made excuses for Tyler too, telling myself he'd come around. But when George's condition worsened, Tyler stayed away. I was the one who sat by George's hospital bed, counting his breaths, whispering stories of our early days to keep him calm. Tyler showed up once, for an hour, his phone buzzing the whole time. "Work," he muttered, leaving before George woke up. George died on a rainy Tuesday 3 years ago. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath, the room silent except for the beep of machines being turned off. Tyler didn't come to the hospital that day. He sent a text. "Sorry, Evelyn, I'll handle the funeral." And he did, with a cold efficiency that chilled me. At the service, he played the grieving son, shaking hands, accepting condolences. I stood beside him, a shadow in black, my grief too raw for words. I thought we'd mourn together, that loss would bring us closer. But Tyler pulled away, his visits dwindling to nothing. I told myself he was coping in his own way. I told myself a lot of things. Sitting in that nursing home room, the memories stung like salt in a wound. I'd given up my shop, my savings, my dreams of a quiet retirement by the sea, all for a family that wasn't mine. Not really. I'd poured my heart into Tyler, believing he saw me as more than his father's second wife. But yesterday, in the lobby of Hearthgrove Pines, his lie had been so smooth, so practiced. "She's forgetting things," he'd told the nurse, his voice steady as he signed away my freedom. My memory was fine, sharp enough to recall every promise he'd broken, every dollar I'd lent, every night I'd stayed up worrying about him. I stood and paced the small room, my slippers whispering against the linoleum floor. The air felt too thick, like it was pressing me down. I stopped at the window, my reflection faint against the glass. My eyes were tired, but there was a fire in them I hadn't seen in years. I thought of George, his warm hand in mine, his quiet faith in me. He'd always said I was stronger than I knew. I hadn't believed him then, but now, trapped in this place, I felt that strength stirring, like a seed cracking open in the dark. Why had Tyler done this? Was it greed, resentment, or something darker? I didn't know yet, but the question burned in me, sharp and relentless. I'd spent years building a family, only to find myself cast out, a stranger in their story. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The boy I'd raised had underestimated me, and that was his first mistake. How do you keep yourself whole when the world decides you're already broken? In that nursing home, surrounded by beige walls and the hum of pity, I felt like a ghost in my own life. But something was waking up inside me, a spark, faint but stubborn. Was it possible to claw my way back from this cage? The days at Hearthgrove Pines blurred into one another, each marked by the same rhythm, the clatter of breakfast trays, the murmur of nurses' voices, the slow shuffle of slippered feet down the hallway. My room was a cell of beige and silence, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic and overcooked oatmeal. The window, my only link to the outside, showed nothing but a brick wall, its surface stained by years of rain. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, my hands folded tightly, and try to anchor myself to something real, something that wasn't this place. But the truth was, I was disappearing, not just from the world, but from myself. They called me Mrs. Evelyn, their voices syrupy with kindness that felt more like pity. The nurses were efficient, their hands quick as they checked my vitals or handed me pills I didn't need. "For your nerves," one said, her smile too bright, as if I were a child who might break. I wasn't broken, not yet. But the weight of their assumptions pressed down on me, heavy as the locked door at the end of the hall. They'd taken my phone, my purse, my keys, all under the guise of safekeeping. Tyler had made sure of that, his signature on those papers sealing me in. I was a prisoner, not a patient, and the realization burned in my chest, sharp and bitter. I tried to keep my mind sharp. I'd count the tiles on the ceiling, 72, always 72, or recite the names of flowers I used to arrange in my shop, peony, dahlia, ranunculus. I'd trace the lines of my life in my head, from the girl who dreamed of a seaside cottage to the woman who gave it all up for a family that wasn't hers. But the more I thought, the more I felt the walls closing in. The common room was no better, filled with residents who stared at flickering TVs or dozed in wheelchairs, their eyes vacant. I'd sit there sometimes, clutching a book I couldn't focus on, the chatter of game shows blending with the smell of burnt coffee. I was 68, not 90, but here, age didn't matter. You were either useful or you weren't, and I'd been deemed the latter. The nights were worse. The mattress was too firm, the sheets scratchy, and the darkness brought questions I couldn't answer. Why had Tyler done this? Was it the money I'd lent him, the house, or something deeper, a resentment I'd never seen? I'd lie awake, the clocks ticking a cruel metronome, and replay his words in the lobby. "She's forgetting things." The lie was so smooth, so calculated. He'd planned this, hadn't he? Packed my suitcase, chosen the cake, timed it for my birthday. The thought made my stomach churn, not just with anger, but with a creeping doubt. Had I missed something? Had I been too trusting, too blind? On the 5th day, something shifted. I was in the common room pretending to read when a young nurse approached. Her name tag read Nina, and her braids were pinned neatly under her scrub cap. She was different from the others. Her eyes held a warmth that didn't feel rehearsed. "Mrs. Evelyn," she said, her voice low, "you don't seem like you belong here." I blinked, startled, my fingers tightening around the book. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. She glanced over her shoulder, then leaned closer. "I've seen folks who need this place. You're not one of them. Your eyes, they're too sharp." Her words hit me like a lifeline thrown into a storm. I studied her face, searching for a trick, but there was none. "I don't have a choice," I said, barely above a whisper. "My stepson, he signed me in." Nina's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment I thought she'd walk away. Instead, she sat down across from me, her hands folded. "You helped my mom once," she said, her voice softer now. "Years ago, at your flower shop. She was sick, couldn't pay for the bouquet for my sister's graduation. You gave it to her for free, said it was a gift." I froze, a memory flickering to life, a woman with tired eyes, a teenage girl beaming beside her. I'd forgotten that moment, one of countless small kindnesses from my shop days. "That was you?" I asked. Nina nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "I was 14, never forgot it." The air between us shifted like a door cracking open. For the first time in days, I felt seen, not as a patient, not as a burden, but as Evelyn, the woman I'd been before this place. That night, Nina slipped into my room after her shift. The hallway was quiet, the only sound the hum of a distant vacuum. She pressed something into my hand, a cheap flip phone, the kind you'd buy at a gas station. "It's not registered," she whispered. "Use it carefully. They check everything." My fingers closed around the phone, its plastic edges cool against my skin. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice trembling. She shrugged, but her eyes were fierce. "Because you're not crazy, and you're not done." I hid the phone under my mattress, my heart racing. It was a small thing, but it felt like a key to a lock I hadn't known existed. For the first time, I let myself imagine a way out, not just from Hearthgrove Pines, but from the life Tyler had tried to trap me in. I didn't know what I'd do next, but Nina's belief in me had lit a spark, one that refused to flicker out. I lay awake that night, the phone's weight a secret anchor, and felt something new, hope, fragile but growing. What do you do when the man you loved leaves you a secret that could rewrite your fate? In the dim light of that nursing home room, I found a piece of George, not in memory but in words he'd hidden away, a message that shook me to my core and whispered, "You're not done yet." But what had he known, and why had he kept it from me? The flip phone Nina gave me was a lifeline, its weight under my mattress a quiet rebellion against the beige prison of Hearthgrove Pines. I'd lie awake at night, the clock's relentless ticking blending with the distant hum of a nurse's cart, and run my fingers over its plastic edges, imagining the world beyond these walls. The air in my room was heavy, laced with the sharp bite of antiseptic and the faint must of old linens. The single window offered no solace, just the same brick wall, its cracks etched deeper by the morning light. I was trapped, but Nina's words, "You're not done," echoed in me, a pulse of defiance that refused to fade. I'd spent days replaying Tyler's betrayal, dissecting every word, every glance, searching for the why. The pain was a constant ache, but it was sharpening into something else, resolve. I couldn't stay here, fading into the background of other people's pity. But to escape, I needed more than a phone. I needed a plan. And then, on the 7th day, Nina gave me something that changed everything. It was just after lunch, the common room buzzing with the clink of trays and the drone of a soap opera on the TV. I sat in my usual corner, a crossword puzzle untouched in my lap, when Nina slipped beside me. Her scrubs smelled faintly of lavender, a small rebellion against the sterile scent of the place. "I went to your house," she whispered, her eyes scanning the room. My heart stuttered. "What? How?" She leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "You mentioned your spare key once, under the garden pot. I got in, found your old purse in the attic. There was a USB drive inside, tucked in a pocket." I stared at her, my mind racing. A USB drive? I hadn't used one in years, not since George was alive and we'd share files for his business or my shop's invoices. "Why would you risk that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Nina's eyes softened, but her jaw was set. "Because you helped my mom when no one else did. And because I see you, Evelyn. You're not invisible." Her words hit me like a wave, stirring memories of my flower shop days, of customers who became friends, of a life where I'd mattered. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the crossword. "Did you look at it?" I asked. She shook her head. "It's yours. I'll bring it tonight." That evening, after the nurse's rounds, Nina slipped into my room, the door creaking softly behind her. The hallway was silent, the air thick with the weight of secrets. She handed me a small black USB drive, its surface scratched from years of neglect. My hands shook as I took it, the plastic cool against my palm. "Be careful," she said, her voice low. "They check the computers in the lounge. Use the phone to access it if you can." I nodded, my throat tight. She left as quietly as she'd come, and I was alone again, the USB a burning weight in my hand. I waited until midnight, when the nursing home was at its quietest. The only sounds the faint buzz of fluorescent lights and the occasional cough from a nearby room. I sat on the bed, the flip phone's dim screen casting a ghostly glow. My fingers fumbled as I connected the USB through a cheap adapter Nina had included. The phone was slow, its processor groaning, but eventually a folder appeared. George's files. My breath caught. George. My George, gone 3 years, his voice still alive in my dreams. I opened the folder, my heart pounding. There were spreadsheets, invoices, old photos of us at the beach, his smile crinkling his eyes. But one file stood out. Draft email Evelyn.txt. My name. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. What could he have written that he never sent? I opened it, and his words filled the screen, typed in the plain font he always used. Evelyn, my love. If you're reading this, I'm probably gone, and things have gone wrong. I've set up a bank account with Red Oak Holdings. Your name is on it. Equal ownership. The details are in the safe, code 5281. I didn't tell you because I hoped I'd never need to. Tyler's been asking about money, pushing for control. I trust him, but if he does something foolish, this is your safety net. You're stronger than you know. Don't let anyone take that from you. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. George. I read it again, then a third time, my eyes stinging. The words were a knife cutting through the fog of grief and betrayal. George had known. He'd seen something in Tyler, a greed, a calculation, and he'd hidden this account to protect me. Red Oak Holdings. I didn't know what it was, but the name burned into my memory. My fingers trembled as I scrolled further, finding a scanned document, a bank statement from 2 years before George died. The balance was staggering, hundreds of thousands, maybe more, in my name alongside his. My breath hitched. This was real. This was mine. But the shock was laced with pain. Why hadn't he told me? Had he doubted me, or was he shielding me from Tyler's ambitions even then? I closed my eyes, picturing George's face, his calloused hands, the way he'd hum off-key while cooking breakfast. He'd loved me, I knew that, but this secret felt like a wound. Had he known Tyler would betray me? Had he seen this nursing home coming? The questions swirled, each one a thorn in my heart. I hid the USB under the mattress next to the phone and lay back, the ceiling tiles blurring above me. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier, but something in me was shifting. George's words had lit a fire, not just hope, but purpose. Tyler had locked me away, thinking I'd fade, but he didn't know about this. He didn't know I had a map, a key, a chance. I thought of his smooth lies in the lobby, his practiced concern. He'd planned to bury me here, to take everything, but George had left me a weapon, and I was going to use it. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced, piecing together a plan. The phone was my link to the outside, but I needed more. Access to that account, proof of my rights, someone to trust. Nina was my ally, but she was young, risking too much already. I needed someone with power, someone who knew George, who knew me. Keller, George's old lawyer, flashed into my mind. He'd handled our wills, our taxes. If anyone could help, it was him. But how would I reach him from here? The first light of dawn crept through the window, painting the brick wall in shades of gray. I sat up, my hands steady now, the USB's weight a silent promise. I didn't know how I'd escape yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't just a widow, a stepmother, a forgotten woman. I was Evelyn, and I had a fight to win. Tyler thought he'd written the end of my story, but he was wrong. This was only the beginning. How do you run when every step feels like a betrayal of the life you thought you knew? Holding George's secret in my hands, I knew I couldn't stay in that nursing home, locked away like a forgotten relic. But escaping wasn't just about leaving. It was about reclaiming myself. Could I outsmart Tyler's trap and step back into the world he'd tried to erase me from? The air in my room at Hearthgrove Pines was stifling, the faint scent of antiseptic mingling with the musty undertone of old carpet. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, each second a reminder of the life slipping away outside these beige walls. The USB drive, now hidden beneath my mattress alongside Nina's flip phone, burned in my mind like a beacon. George's email, his secret account at Red Oak Holdings, had given me something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power. Not the kind that shouts, but the quiet kind that grows in the dark, waiting for its moment. Tyler thought he'd buried me here, but he didn't know I'd found a way to fight back. Not yet. I spent the next 2 days planning, my thoughts sharp despite the fog of confinement. The nursing home was a fortress of routine, nurses' rounds at predictable hours, locked doors, cameras in the hallways. Escaping wouldn't be easy, but Nina's phone was my lifeline, and her trust was my anchor. I'd lie awake at night, the mattress creaking under me, and picture the world beyond. Charleston's oak-lined streets, the river's gentle hum, a life where I wasn't a name on a chart. The fear was there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by something fiercer, determination. I was 68, but I wasn't done, not by a long shot. Nina came to me during a quiet afternoon in the common room, the TV droning with a game show no one watched. I was pretending to read, my fingers tracing the same paragraph over and over, when she slipped into the chair beside me. Her lavender-scented scrubs were a small rebellion against the sterile air. "I reached out to someone," she whispered, her eyes flicking to the nurse at the counter. "Mr. Keller, your husband's lawyer. He's willing to help." My heart leapt, but I kept my face neutral, years of keeping my emotions in check serving me well. "How did you find him?" I asked, my voice low. She smirked just a little. "Your old address book was in that purse. I called him from a payphone. He remembers you." "Keller, George's friend, our lawyer, the man who drafted our wills with a steady hand and a dry sense of humor. If anyone could verify the Red Oak Holdings account, it was him." "What did he say?" I pressed, my fingers tightening around the book. Nina leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "He checked the account. It's real, Evelyn. Your name's on it, just like George wrote. Over $500,000 untouched. He's ready to meet, but you need to get out first." $500,000. The number hit me like a wave, not for its size, but for what it meant. George had planned for this, for me. For a moment, I saw his face, his crinkled smile, and my chest ached with a mix of love and regret. Why hadn't he told me? Nina's voice pulled me back. "We need a plan. They watch everything." I nodded, my mind racing. "Can you get me paperwork? Something that looks official, like a transfer to another facility?" Her eyes widened, but she didn't hesitate. "I know someone who can forge it, but it'll take a day." I met her gaze, the weight of her risks settling on me. "Nina, if they catch you—" She cut me off, her voice firm. "They won't. You helped my mom. I'm helping you." The simplicity of her loyalty, so rare in this place, nearly broke me. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Tomorrow, then." The next 24 hours were a study in patience. I moved through the nursing home's routines like a ghost. Breakfast in the dining hall, where the oatmeal tasted like glue. Physical therapy, where I stretched muscles that ached from disuse. Quiet hours in my room, where I memorized every crack in the ceiling. But inside, I was alive, my thoughts electric. I pictured the escape, a car waiting at dawn, a forged document, a new start. The fear was there, a cold sweat on my palms, but it wasn't paralyzing. It was fuel. Tyler had underestimated me, and that was his mistake. Nina returned the next evening, her face calm but her eyes bright with urgency. She slipped a folded paper into my hand during a pretend blood pressure check, her fingers brushing mine. "Transfer order," she whispered. "You're being moved to a rehab facility tomorrow at 6 a.m. A friend's driving the car. Someone I trust." I unfolded the paper later, alone in my room, the dim light of the bedside lamp casting shadows. The document was flawless. Hearthgrove Pines transfer authorization, my name typed neatly, a fake doctor's signature scrawled at the bottom. I tucked it under my pillow, my heart pounding. This was it, my way out. I barely slept that night, the clock's ticks louder than ever. I thought of George, his email, his trust in me. I thought of Tyler, his smooth lies, his betrayal on my birthday. And I thought of myself, not the widow, not the stepmother, but Evelyn, the woman who'd once run a flower shop, who'd loved fiercely, who'd survived. At 5 a.m., I dressed in the plain clothes Nina had smuggled in, a gray sweater, slacks, sneakers that felt foreign on my feet. I packed nothing but the USB, the phone, and the transfer paper. The suitcase Tyler had packed stayed in the corner, a relic of his trap. At 5:55, Nina knocked softly. I opened the door, my breath shallow. She led me down the hallway, her steps silent, her face a mask of focus. The nursing home was still, the nurse's station empty save for a lone aide dozing over paperwork. We slipped past the cameras, my heart in my throat, and out a side door into the pre-dawn chill. The air was crisp, scented with dew and pine, and for a moment I stood frozen, drinking it in. Freedom tasted sharp, like the first bite of an apple. A gray sedan idled in the lot, its headlights off. Nina opened the back door and I slid in, my hands trembling. The driver, a young man with a quiet nod, didn't speak. "Go," Nina whispered, and the car pulled away, the nursing home shrinking in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back. The sky was turning pink, the oaks along the road casting long shadows. I clutched the phone, the USB, the paper, my lifelines. I was out, but I wasn't safe. Not yet. As the car merged onto the highway, I let myself breathe. Keller was waiting. The account was real. I had a chance. But the questions lingered, sharp as ever. What was Tyler hiding? And what would I do with the freedom I'd just stolen back? What do you do when you uncover a lie so bold it rewrites your past? In a quiet house by the river, I thought I'd found safety, a place to breathe. But the papers Keller brought me revealed a truth that cut deeper than Tyler's betrayal. How had I missed it? And what had George really left behind? The house by the river was small, its clapboard walls weathered by years of Charleston's humid summers. It sat tucked among willows, their branches trailing into the slow-moving water, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and magnolia. I'd arrived at dawn, the gray sedan dropping me off with nothing but Nina's phone, the USB drive, and the forged transfer papers. The house belonged to a friend of Keller's, a temporary haven until I could plan my next move. Inside, the rooms were sparse. A creaky wooden floor, a sagging couch, a kitchen table scarred by decades of use. But it was mine for now, and after the sterile cage of Hearthgrove pines, it felt like a palace. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the river reflect the morning light, its surface rippling like silk. My hands, still trembling from the escape, gripped a chipped mug of tea, the steam curling up to meet my face. Freedom was a strange thing, sharp and fragile, like a blade you're afraid to touch. I was out, but the weight of George's secret, the Red Oak Holdings account, pressed against me. $500,000, Keller had confirmed, locked away in my name. It was a lifeline, but also a question. Why had George hidden it? And what had Tyler done to make him fear? Keller arrived that afternoon, his old pickup crunching gravel as it pulled up. He was 72, his face lined like a map of hard years, but his eyes were sharp, the same steady gaze that had calmed me when we'd signed our wills a decade ago. He carried a leather satchel, its edges worn soft, and set it on the table with a thud. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low. "You look like hell, but you're alive." I managed a faint smile, the first in days. "Barely. What did you find?" He opened the satchel, pulling out a stack of documents, their edges crisp despite the weight of their secrets. "The account's legitimate," he said, sliding a bank statement toward me. "Red Oak Holdings, opened 6 years ago. George put your name on it as co-owner, equal rights. Tyler's got no claim unless he can prove you're unfit, which he's trying to do with that nursing home stunt." I traced the numbers on the statement, the balance staggering in black ink. My throat tightened. "He knew," I whispered. "George knew Tyler might do something like this." Keller nodded, his expression grim. "There's more." He handed me another document, this one thicker, labeled "Last Will and Testament of George William Hargrove." My heart stuttered. I'd seen George's will before, the one we'd drafted together, leaving the house to me and a trust for Tyler. But this was different. The date was recent, 6 months after George's death. My name was there, but the signature beneath it wasn't mine. The loops were too tight, the slant too sharp. A forgery. I stared at the paper, my pulse loud in my ears. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, like a storm was brewing inside me. "This says I agreed to transfer the estate to Tyler," I said, my voice shaking. "I never signed this." Keller's jaw tightened. "I know. I pulled it from the county records. Someone filed it quietly, banking on you not noticing, or not being around to notice." The implication landed like a stone. Tyler had planned this long before the nursing home, before my birthday, before George's death. He'd forged my signature to steal everything. I stood pacing the creaky floor, my hands clenching and unclenching. The river outside murmured, its calm a stark contrast to the rage building in me. I thought of Tyler's boyish grin, his promises to make us proud, the nights I'd defended him to George when he'd skipped visits. Had it all been a lie? I stopped at the window, my reflection faint against the glass. My eyes were tired, but there was a fire in them, a spark that hadn't been there in years. "When was this filed?" I asked, turning back to Keller. He checked the document. 3 months ago, right around the time you had that fall." The fall? I'd tripped on the porch steps, bruised my hip, spent a night in the hospital. Tyler had been there, all concerned, bringing me soup and insisting I rest. I'd thought it was care, but now I saw it. Opportunity. "I was in the hospital," I said, my voice cold. "There's a record of it. I couldn't have signed this." Keller's eyes lit up, the lawyer in him waking. "That's our leverage. A forged will, filed when you were incapacitated. We can challenge it." I sat back down, my fingers brushing the forged signature. The betrayal wasn't just Tyler's. It was the life I'd built, the trust I'd poured into him. I remembered the day he'd called me Mom, his voice soft after I'd paid for his college books. I'd believed in him, in us. But now, the truth was clear. I'd been a means to an end, a signature to manipulate. The pain was raw, but it was also clarifying. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom anymore. I was fighting for the truth George had tried to protect. Keller gathered the papers, his voice steady. "We need to move fast. Tyler's probably checking on you, wondering why the nursing home hasn't called. I'll start pulling records, build a case. You stay here. Keep that phone close." I nodded, my mind already racing. The house felt safer now, its quiet a shield, but I knew it was temporary. Tyler wasn't done, and neither was I. I walked Keller to his truck, the gravel sharp under my sneakers, and watched him drive away, the river's hum filling the silence. Back inside, I stood at the table, the forged will staring up at me. I traced the fake signature again, my finger lingering on the ink. George had left me the account, but what else had he hidden? And why had Tyler gone to such lengths to erase me? The questions were a current, pulling me deeper. I wasn't just running now. I was chasing something bigger than I'd ever imagined. What do you do when the past hands you a weapon you never knew you had? In that quiet house by the river, I thought I'd uncovered the depth of Tyler's betrayal with his forged will, but George had left me something more. A voice from beyond the grave that could shatter everything Tyler had built. Was I ready to wield it? And at what cost? The river outside my temporary Charleston hideout flowed steadily, its surface catching the late afternoon light like a ribbon of molten gold. Inside, the house was still. The only sounds the creak of the wooden floor beneath my pacing feet and the faint hum of a refrigerator that had seen better days. The air smelled of old wood and the faint sweetness of magnolia drifting through an open window. The forged will lay on the kitchen table, its fake signature a taunt, a reminder of how far Tyler had gone to erase me. But I wasn't erased. Not yet. George's secret bank account, the Red Oak Holdings Fund, had given me a foothold, and Keller's promise to challenge the forgery was a spark. Now I needed more than a spark. I needed fire. I'd spent the morning sifting through the documents Keller had left, my hands steady despite the storm in my chest. The river's murmur was a constant companion, grounding me as I traced numbers, dates, and lies. The forged will was a bold move, but Tyler was clever. He'd timed it perfectly, exploiting my hospital stay to make it seem plausible. I pictured him in his sleek office, signing my name with that boyish grin, believing I'd never know. The betrayal stung, not just for what he'd done, but for how long he'd planned it. Had he ever cared? Or had I been a pawn from the start? Keller returned that evening, his pickup rumbling into the gravel drive as the sky turned dusky purple. He carried a small metal box, its edges dented, and set it on the table with a heavy thud. "Found this in George's old office," he said, his voice gruff but his eyes bright with something like triumph. "Tucked behind a file cabinet labeled Evelyn. Took me a while to crack the lock." My breath caught. George. Another piece of him, hidden away. I reached for the box, my fingers brushing the cold metal, and felt a pang of longing for his steady presence, his crinkled smile. Inside was a hard drive, its black casing scratched but intact, along with a folded note in George's familiar scrawl. I unfolded it, my hands trembling. "Evelyn, if you find this, you're already fighting. The drive has what you need. Code 5281. Trust yourself." The same code as the safe in his email. My throat tightened, and for a moment I was back in our old kitchen, George humming off-key while I arranged flowers for a client. He'd always said I was stronger than I knew. Now, I was starting to believe him. Keller plugged the drive into his laptop, the screen casting a pale glow across the table. The folder opened with the code, revealing a single video file, For Evelyn 03/15/2021.cmp4. 3 months before George died. My heart pounded as I clicked play. The screen flickered, and there he was, George sitting in his office, the lamplight catching the gray in his hair. He looked tired, his eyes heavy, but his voice was firm. "Evelyn, if you're watching this, I'm gone, and Tyler's done something I feared he might. I've set up the Red Oak account for you, $500,000, maybe more by now. It's yours, legally, irrevocably. If Tyler tries to take the estate, the house, anything, you have the right to void any transaction. The papers are with Keller. Don't let him bully you. You're my heart, always." The video was 3 minutes long, time-stamped, undeniable. George's voice cracked on the last word, and I felt tears spill down my cheeks, hot and silent. He'd known, not just suspected, known, that Tyler might betray me. The pain was raw, not just for the secret, but for the burden he'd carried alone. Why hadn't he told me? Had he thought I couldn't handle it, or was he protecting me from a truth too heavy to bear while he was still alive? I paused the video, George's face frozen on the screen, and pressed my hands to my face, the room spinning. Keller's voice broke the silence. "This is gold, Evelyn. With this, the forged will doesn't stand a chance. We can file with the DOJ, start a fraud investigation. Tyler's done." I looked up, my vision blurred but my mind clear. "He planned this before George died," I said, my voice steady despite the tears. "He was waiting." Keller nodded, his jaw tight. "We need to move fast. He's probably sniffing around, wondering where you are." I wiped my eyes, the fire in me flaring brighter. "Then let's not give him time to catch up." I spent the next hour drafting a plan with Keller. The video was our ace, proof of George's intent, time-stamped and legally binding. The Red Oak account was secure, but we needed to protect it from Tyler's reach. Keller would file a preliminary report with the Department of Justice, citing the forged will and the video as evidence of fraud. I'd stay hidden, the river house my sanctuary, while we built the case. But as I spoke, my mind wandered to Tyler's face in the nursing home lobby, his smooth lies, his calculated hug. He'd underestimated me, but he wasn't stupid. He'd fight back, and I needed to be ready. I walked Keller to his truck, the night air cool and thick with the scent of river mud. The stars were out, sharp against the black sky, and for a moment I felt small, a woman caught in a game bigger than herself. But then I thought of George's voice in the video, steady and sure, and I straightened. "We'll bury him with this," Keller said, climbing into his truck. "Stay safe, Evelyn." I nodded, watching his taillights fade down the gravel road. Back inside, I sat at the table, the laptop still open to George's frozen face. I played the video again, memorizing every word, every inflection. The pain of his secrecy was still there, but so was his love, woven into every syllable. He'd given me a weapon, but it came with a price. The truth about Tyler, about our family, about the years I'd spent believing I belonged. I closed the laptop, the room falling silent except for the river's distant hum. I wasn't just a widow anymore, or a stepmother, or a victim. I was the keeper of George's truth, and I was ready to fight. How do you face the person who tried to erase you, knowing the truth could destroy them? In the quiet of my river house, I thought I'd found strength in George's video and the forged will's exposure. But when Tyler struck back, dragging me to court, I realized this fight wasn't just about money. It was about my right to exist. Could I stand up and speak before he twisted my story into his own? The river outside my Charleston hideout flowed with a steady murmur, its surface glinting under the midday sun like a sheet of polished glass. Inside the house was a cocoon of quiet, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and the faint tang of coffee I'd brewed hours ago. The kitchen table, scarred from years of use, held Keller's latest stack of documents, George's video file saved on a laptop, and the forged will, its fake signature, a silent accusation. I'd spent days preparing, my mind sharp despite the weight of what was coming. Tyler had locked me in a nursing home, thinking I'd fade away, but George's truth had given me a weapon. Now I was ready to use it, or so I thought. I stood at the window, my fingers tracing the chipped paint of the sill, watching a heron glide low over the water. The peace of this place was a fragile shield, one I knew wouldn't last. Keller had filed the preliminary report with the Department of Justice, citing the forged will and George's video as evidence of fraud. It was a quiet move, a seed planted, but Tyler wasn't idle. I could feel him out there, scheming, his ambition a shadow creeping closer. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was tempered by something new, anger, not wild but precise, like a blade honed for battle. Keller's call came that afternoon, his voice crackling through Nina's flip phone. "Evelyn, he's made his move," he said, his tone grim. "Tyler's filed a lawsuit. He's claiming you're mentally unfit, says you manipulated George when he was sick to secure the Red Oak account. He wants the estate, the house, everything, and he's asking the court to freeze your assets." My breath caught, the room tilting. I gripped the phone, my knuckles whitening. He's saying, "A manipulated George?" The irony was bitter, almost laughable, but the weight of it settled like lead. Tyler wasn't just fighting for money, he was rewriting our story, painting me as the villain. Keller's voice steadied me. "He's desperate. The DOJ filing spooked him, even if he doesn't know it's us yet. We've got the video, the forged will, your hospital records. He's got lies and a good lawyer. We'll countersue for fraud and elder abuse." I nodded, though he couldn't see me, my mind racing. "When's the hearing?" I asked. 2 weeks, he said. "Charleston County Courthouse. You need to be there, Evelyn. This is your chance to tell the truth." The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Tell the truth. After years of silence, of swallowing my doubts for the sake of family, could I stand up and speak? I spent the next day preparing with Keller, who arrived with a new satchel of legal papers and a plan. The house felt smaller with him there, the river's hum drowned out by the rustle of documents and his steady voice. "We'll present the video, the forged will, and your medical records from the fall," he said, spreading papers across the table. "Tyler's claiming you were erratic, confused. We'll show you were lucid, targeted, and betrayed." I nodded, my fingers brushing the edge of George's note from the hard drive. "Trust yourself." I did, but the thought of facing Tyler in court, his eyes on me, his lies laid bare, sent a shiver through me. To strengthen our case, I hired a team of independent legal experts, funded by a small withdrawal from the Red Oak account. Keller recommended them, sharp, discreet, unafraid to dig. They reviewed the forged will, confirming the signature's inconsistencies, and cross-referenced it with my hospital stay. "Ironclad," one said, her voice crisp over a secure call. "He didn't just forge your name, he filed it knowing you couldn't contest it." The words fueled my resolve, but they also deepened the wound. Tyler hadn't just betrayed me, he'd planned to bury me alive. I needed the world to hear my story, not Tyler's version of it. Late one night, I recorded a video on the laptop, the river's reflection flickering through the window behind me. "My name is Evelyn Hargrove," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I was locked in a nursing home by my stepson, stripped of my freedom, my voice. This is what happened." I told it all, the birthday deception, the forged will, George's secret. I didn't name Tyler, not yet, but the truth was clear. I sent the file to a local journalist, a woman Keller trusted, with a note, "Publish anonymously, let the world decide." It was a risk, but silence had been my cage for too long. The next morning, I walked to the river's edge, the grass damp under my sneakers, the air cool and thick with the scent of mud and moss. I stood there, watching the current carry a leaf downstream, and let myself feel the weight of what was coming. Court wasn't just a legal battle. It was a reckoning. Tyler would be there, his charm polished, his lies rehearsed. I pictured his face, the boy I'd raised, the man who'd betrayed me, and wondered, would he look at me with guilt or just defiance? The question gnawed at me, but it also clarified something. I wasn't fighting for revenge. I was fighting for myself, for the woman George had believed in, for the life I still had left. Back inside, I sat at the table, the legal papers spread before me like a map. Keller had left a note. "You're ready, Evelyn. Don't let him steal your voice." I traced the words, my fingers steady now. The river kept flowing, the house kept standing, and I kept breathing. Tyler thought he could control the story, but he'd forgotten one thing. I was the one who'd lived it, and I was done staying silent. "How do you stand in a room full of eyes and prove you're not invisible?" In that Charleston courtroom, I faced Tyler, his lies, and the weight of a life I'd fought to reclaim. Every word I spoke was a step toward freedom, but could I make them see me? Not as a shadow, but as a woman who refused to be erased? The Charleston County Courthouse loomed like a sentinel, its brick facade warmed by the late morning sun, but inside the air was cool and sharp, scented with polished wood and old paper. I stood at the entrance, my hands smoothing the navy blazer Keller had insisted I wear, simple, strong, a signal I wasn't here to beg. My heart pounded, a steady drum against my ribs as I stepped through the heavy doors, the heels of my sensible shoes clicking on the marble floor. Today was the hearing, the climax of Tyler's lawsuit to declare me unfit and seize George's estate. But I wasn't the woman he'd locked away in Hearthgrove Pines. I was Evelyn Hargrove, and I was ready to fight. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, its walls lined with dark paneling, the benches worn smooth by years of anxious hands. The air held a faint mustiness, like books left too long on a shelf. Tyler was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table, his suit crisp, his posture perfect. He didn't look at me as I entered, but I felt his presence, a shadow I'd once loved. Keller sat beside me, his leather satchel open, our evidence meticulously arranged, George's video, the forged will, my hospital records, the independent psychiatric evaluation. Each was a brick in the wall we'd built to protect my truth. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and a no-nonsense gaze, called the session to order. Her voice was clear, cutting through the room's tension like a blade. In the matter of Evelyn Hargrove's mental competency and the estate of George Hargrove, she began, and I felt every eye turn to me. The weight was heavy, but I straightened, my hands folded tightly in my lap, and met her gaze. This was my moment. Tyler's lawyer went first, a tall man with a voice as smooth as polished glass. He painted a picture of me as erratic, confused, a woman who'd manipulated a dying George to secure the Red Oak Holdings account. Mrs. Hargrove has shown unstable behavior, he said, producing a video, grainy, edited, showing me in the nursing home, my voice raised in frustration, my hands trembling. It was a moment of anger, twisted to look like madness. He followed with a letter from a psychiatrist I'd never met, claiming I was disoriented and potentially dangerous. The lies were bold, calculated, and I felt the room shift, the air thickening with doubt. Tyler took the stand next, his face a mask of practiced sorrow. "I love Evelyn," he said, his voice trembling just enough to seem sincere. "But she's not herself. When my father was sick, she pressured him, confused him. I just want to protect his legacy." His words were a knife, twisting the memory of George's love into something sordid. I gripped the edge of my seat, my nails digging into the wood, but I didn't look away. His eyes flickered to mine for a moment, and I saw it. Not guilt, but fear. He knew I wasn't the woman he'd locked away. Keller stood, his voice calm but unyielding. "Your Honor, we have evidence that tells a different story." He presented my psychiatric evaluation first, conducted by Dr. Laura Bennett, a neutral expert who'd spent hours with me. "Mrs. Hargrove is fully competent," the report stated, with no signs of cognitive decline or emotional instability. Keller handed the judge the document, its pages crisp, its findings undeniable. The room felt quieter, the air shifting back toward me. Then came the video. Keller set up a small screen, and George's face appeared, his voice steady despite the weariness in his eyes. "If Tyler tries to take the estate, Evelyn has the right to void any transaction," he said, the timestamp clear, March 15th, 2021. The courtroom was silent, every word landing like a stone. I watched Tyler's face, his jaw tightening, his hands clenching the table. He hadn't known about this, hadn't planned for George's voice to reach beyond the grave. I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of George's trust, his love, still protecting me. Keller followed with the forged will, its signature glaringly false under scrutiny. "This document was filed while Mrs. Hargrove was hospitalized, unable to sign," he said, producing my medical records from the fall. "The plaintiff orchestrated a fraud to seize the estate, then confined Mrs. Hargrove to a nursing home to silence her. The judge's eyes narrowed, her pen pausing over her notes. I felt the tide turning, but I knew it wasn't enough. They needed to hear me. I stood, my legs trembling but my voice steady. "Your Honor, may I speak?" She nodded, and I walked to the stand, the room's eyes heavy on me. I took a breath, the air cool against my lips, and began. "My name is Evelyn Hargrove. I'm 68 years old, and I'm not confused, not unstable, not a burden. I raised Tyler as my own, gave up my business, my savings, my dreams to support him and his father. And on my birthday, he locked me in a nursing home, took my phone, my freedom, my voice. He forged my signature to steal what George left me. But I'm here now, and I won't be silenced." I held up a letter, one George had written by hand, found in the same box as the video. My voice shook as I read. "If I'm gone, Evelyn decides everything. She's my heart, my strength." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of our life together. I looked at Tyler, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the floor. "You can't take that from me," I said. Not to him, but to the room, to the judge, to myself. The silence was deafening, broken only by the judge's pen scratching against her notepad. Tyler's lawyer tried to object, but his voice lacked conviction. The judge raised a hand, her expression unreadable. "I've heard enough for now," she said. "The evidence is compelling. Mr. Hargrove, I'm ordering you to withdraw your petition. Mrs. Hargrove's competency is restored, as is her control over her assets." The gavel fell, a sharp crack that echoed in my chest. I exhaled, my hands trembling, but I didn't cry, not yet. As we left the courtroom, Tyler stood, his shoulders slumped, his mask of charm gone. He didn't speak, didn't look at me. I wanted to feel triumph, but all I felt was the weight of what I'd lost. Not just a stepson, but the illusion of family. I walked out into the sunlight, the river's distant hum calling me back to the house, to the life I was rebuilding. I'd won, but the fight wasn't over, not yet. What do you do when the person who broke you reaches out, not with regret, but with a plea? After the courtroom, I thought I'd closed the door on Tyler, my stepson who'd locked me away. But his letter, delivered to my river house, cracked that door open, stirring questions I wasn't ready to face. Could I forgive the unforgivable, or was this just another of his lies? The river outside my Charleston hideout flowed with a quiet insistence, its surface catching the soft glow of a late autumn dusk, turning the water to liquid amber. Inside, the house was a sanctuary of worn wood and muted light, the air scented with the faint musk of old books and the coffee I'd brewed to keep me awake. The kitchen table, scarred by years of use, held only a single envelope now, its edges crisp, my name written in Tyler's precise hand. It had arrived that morning, slipped through the mail slot by an unknown courier, and I'd left it unopened for hours, its presence a weight I wasn't sure I could bear. I stood at the window, my fingers brushing the cool glass, watching the willows sway in the evening breeze. The courtroom victory was still fresh. George's video, the forged will, my voice finally heard. The judge had restored my freedom, my assets, my truth. Tyler had left the courthouse defeated, his charm shattered, his lies exposed. I'd thought that was the end, a clean break from the boy I'd raised, the man who'd betrayed me. But this letter, this unexpected intrusion, stirred a storm in me, anger, yes, but also a flicker of something softer, something I didn't want to name. I sat at the table, the envelope staring up at me like a challenge. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the paper smooth against my fingertips. I could burn it, ignore it, let Tyler fade into the past. But curiosity, or perhaps a lingering hope, won out. I slid a butter knife under the flap, the tear of paper loud in the quiet room. Inside was a single sheet, folded once, and I unfolded it slowly, my breath shallow. Tyler's handwriting filled the page, neat but hurried, as if he'd written in a rush. Evelyn, I know I don't deserve your time, let alone your forgiveness. I've done things I can't undo, locking you away, forging the will, trying to take what wasn't mine. I told myself it was for Dad's legacy, but that was a lie. It was greed, resentment, fear that you'd take what I thought was mine. I was wrong about everything. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking for a chance to explain, to make things right. There's something you don't know. About Dad. About why I did what I did. Meet me at the old pier, tomorrow at noon. Please. I'll be alone. Tyler. I read it again, then a third time. My hands steady now, but my mind reeling. The words were raw, unguarded, unlike the polished lies he'd spun in court. But was it real? Tyler was a master of performance, his boyish grin a mask I'd once trusted. I leaned back in the chair, the wood creaking under me, and closed my eyes. Memories flooded in. Tyler at 16, his quick hug after I'd helped with his homework. Tyler at 25, promising to visit George in the hospital, then never showing. Tyler at 38, signing me into Hearthgrove Pines with a smile. Each moment was a thread in the tapestry of our shared history, now frayed and tangled. The river's hum filled the silence, a steady reminder of the world moving on. I stood and paced the small kitchen, my sneakers whispering against the floorboards. The letter felt like a trap, another manipulation, but there was something in it, a crack in Tyler's armor, a hint of vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Something you don't know about Dad. The words gnawed at me, stirring questions I'd buried. George's secrets, the Red Oak account, the video, the note, had saved me. But what else had he hidden? And why was Tyler reaching out now after losing everything? I sat again, my fingers tracing the letter's edges. The pain of his betrayal was still raw, a wound that hadn't healed. I'd given him my heart, my savings, my years, believing we were family. He'd repaid me with a nursing home cell and a forged signature. But the Evelyn who'd escaped Hearthgrove Pines, who'd stood in that courtroom, wasn't the same woman who'd trusted blindly. I was sharper now, forged in the fire of his deceit. If this was a trap, I'd walk into it with eyes open. If it was truth, I needed to hear it, for George, for myself. I called Keller, the flip phone's keys stiff under my fingers. "Tyler sent a letter," I said when he answered, my voice calm despite the storm inside. "He wants to meet, tomorrow at the pier." Keller's silence was heavy. Then he sighed. "It's a risk, Evelyn. He's cornered, desperate. Could be a play to salvage something." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I know, but he mentioned George, something I don't know. I need to hear it." Keller's voice softened. "Then go, but not alone. I'll be nearby, out of sight. Bring the phone." That night, I barely slept, the river's song mingling with the creak of the house settling. I lay in the narrow bed, the letter on the nightstand, and pictured the pier, a weathered stretch of wood where George and I used to walk, the air thick with salt and possibility. Tyler had been there too, years ago, a teenager kicking pebbles into the water, calling me Mom. The memory ached, but I pushed it away. I wasn't going for nostalgia. I was going for answers. At dawn, I dressed carefully. Jeans, a simple sweater, sneakers for running if I needed to. I tucked the phone in my pocket, the letter in my bag, and stood at the mirror. My face was lined, my eyes tired, but there was a fire in them, a strength George had seen, that Nina had seen, that I was finally seeing. I drove to the pier in Keller's borrowed car, the river glinting beside me, the air crisp with the promise of fall. My hands were steady on the wheel, my heart a quiet drum. Tyler was waiting, and so was the truth. I was ready to face both. What do you do when the fight you've won leaves you standing alone, holding the pieces of a family that never truly was? At the pier, Tyler's confession stripped away the last of my illusions, but it also handed me a choice. Could I rebuild something from the ashes of betrayal, not for him, but for the woman George loved and the legacy I still believed in? The Charleston Pier stretched out over the river, its weathered planks creaking under my steps, the air thick with the briny scent of salt water and the faint sweetness of marsh grass. The morning sun hung low, casting long shadows that danced on the water's surface, rippling like memories I couldn't quite grasp. I stood at the edge, my hands gripping the railing, the wood rough against my palms. Tyler's letter, now folded in my pocket, had brought me here. Its words. "There's something you don't know about Dad." A hook I couldn't ignore. Keller was parked a block away, watching, the flip phone a quiet weight in my sweater. I was ready, but my heart was heavy, caught between the woman who'd loved Tyler as a son and the woman he'd tried to erase. He appeared at 11:55, his silhouette sharp against the rising light, his steps hesitant. No suit today, just jeans, a faded jacket, his face unshaven and gaunt. The boyish grin I'd once trusted was gone, replaced by something raw, almost broken. He stopped a few feet away, his hands shoved in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the planks. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low, cracked. "You came." I didn't smile, didn't soften. "You said you had something to tell me, so tell me." My voice was steady, but inside I was braced for another lie, another performance. He exhaled, his breath visible in the cool air, and looked out at the river. "I didn't want to hurt you," he began, and I almost laughed, the pain of Hearthgrove pines flashing through me. But his next words stopped me cold. Dad knew I wasn't his, biologically. Margaret, my mom, she told him before she died. He raised me anyway, loved me, but I always felt less, like I had to prove I was worth it. I stared at him, my pulse loud in my ears. George had never told me, not in our quiet nights, not in his email, not in the video. Tyler's eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw not the manipulator, but the boy I'd known, carrying a secret heavier than I'd imagined. "He left you the Red Oak account because he trusted you," Tyler continued, his voice shaking. "Not me. I resented it, resented you. I thought if I could control the estate, the house, everything, I'd finally be enough. So I forged the will, put you in that place. I told myself it was temporary, that you'd be okay. But I was wrong. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to know." The words hung between us, raw and jagged, the river's hum the only sound. I wanted to scream, to demand why he'd let resentment fester into betrayal, but my throat was tight, my mind reeling with George's silence. Why had he kept this from me? I took a step back, the railing cool against my spine. "You locked me away, Tyler," I said, my voice low but sharp. "You stole my life, my freedom, because you felt less. I raised you, I loved you, and you used that against me." His face crumpled, but he didn't look away. "I know," he whispered. "I don't expect forgiveness. I'm turning myself in. For the fraud, the forgery. I wanted you to hear this first from me." The confession landed like a stone, heavy and final. I searched his eyes, looking for the lie, but found only a man stripped bare, his masks gone. I turned to the water, my hands trembling. George's love had been my anchor, but his secrets, first the account, now Tyler's parentage, felt like betrayals of their own. Yet they also explained so much, his protectiveness, his insistence on the Red Oak account, his faith in me. He'd carried this alone to keep our family whole, and I'd carried it too, in my own way, believing in a bond that was never fully mine. The pain was sharp, but it was also clarifying. Tyler's confession wasn't absolution. It was a mirror, showing me the cost of love, the strength it demanded. "I don't forgive you," I said finally, turning back to him. "But I'm not doing this for you anymore. I'm doing it for George, for myself." His shoulders sagged, but he nodded, a silent acceptance. He walked away, his steps heavy, disappearing into the light at the pier's end. I stood there, the river flowing on, and felt a weight lift, not from forgiveness, but from choice. I was free, not just from Tyler, but from the illusion of family I'd clung to. Back at the river house, I sat at the kitchen table, the air warm with the scent of cedar and sunlight. I pulled out a notebook and began to write, my pen moving with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. The Red Oak account was mine, 500,000 strong, but it wasn't just money, it was George's belief in me. I'd use it to start something new, a fund for women like me, silenced by betrayal, locked away by greed. I called it the Margaret Fund, after Tyler's mother, not because I owed her, but because love, even flawed, deserved a name. It would support legal aid, safe houses, second chances, giving voice to the voiceless. I called Keller, my voice steady. "I want to set up a foundation," I said. "The money's mine, and I know what to do with it." He chuckled, a rare warmth in his tone. "George would be proud, Evelyn. Let's make it happen." As I hung up, I looked out at the river, its current endless, carrying the past downstream. Tyler was gone, his confession a closed chapter. George's love, his secrets, his trust, they were mine to carry forward. I wasn't alone anymore. I was building something, not for the family I'd lost, but for the woman I'd become.